Hello, everyone. Today we have the honor of being joined by the guys from the podcast Apologetics 315, Brian Auten and Chad Gross. Did I say that correctly?
You did.
Okay. And so we'll be talking about how Apologetics 315 began and a few other things. So I'm really excited to get started. So before we begin, can you guys tell us a little bit about yourselves? And we'll go from there. Who wants to go first?
Chad, you go first.
Oh, okay. All right. My name's Chad Gross. I'm 45 years old and I'm married to Danielle. I have two daughters, Emma and Lily, who are 13 and 14, and I am an elementary school teacher. And kind of on the side, if you will, I run the blog Truth Bomb Apologetics at truthbomb.blogspot.com. And of course, I am the co-host of the Apologetics 315 podcast with Mr. Auten.
And that's me. I'm Brian. I run that podcast, Apologetics 315 podcast. And I edit those podcasts so that when I say silly things that we take them out. No, I live in Northern Ireland, although I'm originally from Michigan. And so I'm over here with my wife and three kids. And I'm not going to try to remember their ages right now. 7, 11, 14, Eva, Ruby, and Carl. So great fun times. I run a business over here that is uninteresting, but challenging and exciting at the same time with lots of variety. But doing the podcast with my buddy Chad and started the Apologetics 315 website.
All right. Good. So how about we ask Chad a little bit more about his teaching experience? Can you go a little more into that?
Yeah, this is actually my 22nd year teaching elementary school. I have actually taught grades 1 through 5. I've taught them all. I know that there once was a time that you could pick the grade you like to teach and you could teach it your whole career. But that is very rare, at least in the county I teach in. They are typically moving teachers all around. And I went into elementary school because honestly, I didn't know what I wanted to do. And my mom said to me one day, you like kids and kids like you, why don't you teach elementary school? And I thought, that's better reasoning than I have at this point in my life. So I went to Frostburg State University and I've been teaching in Washington County Public Schools, which is in Hagerstown, Maryland. And the pandemic was very interesting. Was past tense, but in the sense of we did remote learning and having second graders on Zoom for 6.5 hours every day was certainly a challenge. Things are somewhat back to normal. The kids are masked, of course, but overall, things are going somewhat getting back to normal, and I'm hoping at least they stay that way.
Okay. What is this recurring theme on your podcast having to do with Ghostbusters?
Do you want to answer that, or do you want me to?
Well, Chad would say that Ghostbusters is the most quotable movie of all time. It's also his favorite movie of all time.
Correct.
I think it is also highly quotable. The most quotable, that's debatable, but we stick a quote in on every episode, and that we haven't run out all year. So it's a great common. See, I grew up watching movies, and then you talk to your family in quotes, and then you have friends who watch the same movies, and you pick a movie and you just talk to them in quotes. So when I met Chad, somehow we just started talking in Ghostbuster quotes and applying it to everything. So we thought, well, when we relaunched the podcast, let's have some fun. And so we jokingly said, well, yeah, we'll just incorporate Ghostbuster quotes in every episode. And then it actually happened. So that's my answer.
No, I wouldn't. The only thing I would add is that we still, to this day, constantly text back and forth Ghostbuster quotes. And while we're doing the podcast, every once in a while, for people who are listening carefully, we will sneak in a quote. My favorite instance of this was when we interviewed Dave Sterrett of Disrupting Truth. And I had jokingly written on the questions we were preparing, "Who does your taxes?" Because that's a quote. That's a quote from the film. And during the interview, Brian actually asked him, "Who does your taxes?" So that was great.
I have to
Yeah.
watch it now. I think I saw it growing up, but like I don't remember it. So I'm gonna go back
Yeah.
and watch it
Well,
because
and
of you guys.
we certainly don't endorse all the content, but
Yes.
just the comedy between the four Ghostbusters and some of the supporting characters and the quotes are just, to me, the best.
Yeah, I grew up with my dad just constantly like saying lines from all kinds of movies. Home Alone, I Love Lucy, so I get it.
Yeah,
Um,
my kids have to endure many Ghostbuster quotes, no doubt.
it's like dad humor, huh?
Yes.
And now I'm doing it as a parent as well.
Yeah.
You know, our viewers probably don't know, but I actually reached out to Brian on Facebook. I guess that's the way you communicate to people. You get into contact with people through Facebook these days. And I was reading a book, A New Kind of Apologist, edited by Sean McDowell. And I was reading that week. It's like a chapter or an article, an essay that Brian actually wrote. And that's what we're going to be talking a little bit right now. But I just kind of wanted to introduce him to my book club, Girl Talk Apologetics, and then he went ahead and invited me onto their podcast to talk a little bit about that. And so you can check that out on their website or on their podcast. But I wanted to ask you a little bit about that, Brian. How was that whole experience being where you reached out by Sean McDowell on the topic? And maybe you could talk a little bit about the topic that you wrote on in that book.
Well, let me go get that book and figure out what I wrote. Um, I just remember Sean reaching out and saying, "Hey, putting together a book regarding, you know, different ways that apologetics is being done nowadays." And at the time, I was the lone and active uh, administrator or founder of Apologetics 315, and it had become a more prominent resource when it comes to finding apologetic stuff. I was talking to Chad earlier where, you know, when it started, it was hard to find apologetic stuff on the internet, you know, back in what, 2007 or 9 or whatever it was. And so that was the idea was not to build a platform or to make a big website. It was just like, oh, here's a cool debate. Check this out. Here's a cool article and everything I was studying. I would write book reports and things and book reviews and post them. So then I started doing the blog and the podcast and that sort of thing, and interviewing scholars and things like that. And so as it grew, I realized that this is reaching a lot of people. And so I think that's why Sean saw that as a new way, you know, of doing apologetics. Well, now it's way more common, but you know, the idea within the book is that you find your role um, within the apologetics community. And again, talking to Chad earlier today, you know, we were interviewing a really smart person, like always, and always am constantly reminded of how dumb I am, and how little I know, and where my strength lies is in maybe finding these resources and getting them to other people, interviewing, asking good questions, maybe being familiar enough with the landscape of apologetics and knowing it in a general way. I'm not an expert in anything. And so, but if I can get the resources from the experts into people's hands or ears or whatever, then I've done my role. So I see their can be content creators. There can be content propagators, people who share things and share articles online. They might be doing more work than the person who put the content out there, so to speak, in the sense of they were the real effective catalyst for someone else finding it, So if you're the person who has the knowledge and training or education where you can speak with authority on a particular topic, whether it's biology or science or philosophy or theology, that's great. Your role is to be the best scholar you can be. But if you're good at graphic design and organization and web hosting and stuff, well, where can you do that? Find your role and what excites you in that and do it. So there's creators, there's propagators, there's people who share it. And I forget the categories I used. I should have gone and looked over what I wrote. Yeah, that's the idea in a nutshell, is that everyone has their role. If you're not an expert, it doesn't matter, because there are experts. You don't have to be an expert, but if you can help get resources into people's hands and find your role and just do apologetics online in that regard, then you are part of that chain that will help someone to find something dealing with doubt or answers to the questions they have about their faith.
Yeah, I would definitely point people to that essay. It was interesting when we interviewed this year Craig Hazen of Biola University. I mean, he runs Biola. And as soon as he got on to do the interview, that right away, he said he talked about that essay and how well it was written and how great it was. And so if you are looking to do some apologetics and a ministry online, it's a great place to start. And like Brian said, to kind of utilize the abilities that you already have.
Yeah, I'm looking at it here under find your role. And I think you have 4 categories: content authors, content artists, content communicators, and content propagators. Just so if anyone was curious.
Thank you.
It's been
we'll include that in the description below.
It's been a little while since this book was new, right? A few years, but it's almost like free marketing now with all of these people on YouTube and websites and ministries like Apologetics 315. It's like you have people in the body of Christ helping like your content to come and reach like way more people than what it might have, huh?
Yeah.
So maybe can you tell us a little bit about the creation of Apologetics 315?
Sure. Back in, say, 2007 or thereabouts, we don't have many records from those times, but I started a blog, and it was basically, I found some audio and some debates and things, and I was listening to podcasts all the time while doing graphic design. Audio files, I should say. Podcasts weren't that much of a thing yet. And as I would find these things, I would post them because I thought, wow, that was hard to find, but I found it. So let me just put all this great stuff in one spot. And so it started to snowball, and I sort of am OCD in the sense of once I start a streak of doing something, then I'm like, oh no, I can't stop doing that now because then I'll break the chain. And so I just started posting every day. And so Apologetics 315, as it started out, was just all the best stuff I could find on certain resources. At the same time, I met Chad back in the day. He was started Truth Bomb Apologetics, and we were actively commenting on each other's blogs. We ended up phoning each other because, hey, who is this guy? He's helping me talk to atheists on the internet. And so we had like a initial 2-hour conversation where it was like, yeah. I'm sorry, I got to go. We could talk for 7 more hours, but I've got to go here. Laced with Ghostbusters quotes, I'm sure.
Exactly.
But that was a great start of a lasting friendship and brotherhood. And Since then, Apologetics 315 has done the podcast. There's lots of interviews, 150 or so. Well, of the past era, where it was just me doing interviews with scholars, and then it shifted just this past year. So we just reached the 1 year anniversary of what we call the reboot, and that's me and Chad working together to have conversations with scholars and experts, and a little bit more fun, less, you know, button-up collar kind of sort of a thing. But yeah, that's how everything started, and now it's run by Defenders Media. I don't have an active hand in that and the blog itself, and now it's a lot of resources because there's so much stuff now. It's just constantly a feed of apologetics material. So in a way, you could say that now we've reached the point where there's so much apologetics stuff and content out there that you almost need a filter to narrow it down. And, because there's so much, and which is a great thing. It's a great thing. And so that's sort of the history in a nutshell. And yeah, we're just going to keep doing the podcast for now. And that's where my strength lies. I don't, as I said before, I'm running a business and I've got 3 kids, which all started within that time frame. The blog started when I didn't have any kids. And so, things have changed. And so I'm focusing on what I feel is at least the better of my strengths in that regard, where I like doing the interviews and that's sustainable and I can focus on that.
Okay. And how exactly does that work? Who chooses the content that goes on your website every day and your social media? Is that you or some Defenders Media?
Well, that's sort of like Kentucky Fried Chicken asking them for their recipe, that's secrets that can't be shared. In fact, I might not even know those secrets. So, yeah, Defenders Media have their hand in that right now. So, yeah, that's a secret sauce.
Okay. The question that will never be answered here on my channel.
The secret sauce. Okay.
How about Chad, your website? Did you want to share a little bit about how you began that?
Sure. I was, oddly enough, I was, I don't know if you'd call it obsessively, but I was regularly, how about we'll call that word, regularly writing letters to the editor. And I began a local paper, and I began going back and forth with a local skeptic. And my pastor, of course, would read these letters. And he came to me one day and he was like, "Hey, these are great. I can tell you're putting a lot of time into them." He said, "But have you ever thought about how you could reach a bigger audience?" And at the time, I was not tech savvy. I'm still not like super tech savvy, but I've come a long way for sure since then. And he said to me, "Have you thought about starting a website?" And I had not. And he said to me in that conversation, sometimes it's worth having a back and forth, but sometimes you have to be like Jesus and just drop the truth bomb and keep going. Thinking of the rich young ruler. I mean, he kind of told him how it was, and the rich young ruler decided to leave. He dropped the truth bomb, right? So I love that word, and I turned it into Truth Bomb Apologetics, and it just started as a blog. Then it started as a church ministry. Then it kind of turned back into more of like a ministry, like an online ministry. And we just feature book reviews and articles and quotes. And I do some writing. And yeah, that's how it got started. It just was kind of a conversation with a pastor, and it's kind of grown and evolved from there. And it's provided us with some great opportunities.
And how about, can you guys remember when was the first moment that you were introduced to Christian apologetics?
Yeah, for me, I'm 45 now. I was 24, and I reached a moment in my life where, by the world's standards, I was doing pretty well for a single guy, but I felt kind of empty. and I was getting into some habits that I knew weren't the best. And I had a friend who was a Christian, and he kept inviting me to church, and I finally went. And the pastor did a couple things. The first thing he did is he talked about Jesus like he knew him, and that intrigued me, because I had always thought that I knew Jesus was crucified, but as far as I knew at that time, when people were crucified and died, they stayed dead. And then he also encouraged his congregation and skeptics that might have been in the congregation, or his listeners, to check the evidence out for Christianity. Well, I remember at the time that was just like evidence for Christianity. I thought religions were like shoe sizes. Buddhism fits you. Christianity fits you. That's great as long as it helps you. As you keep to yourself, I'll keep to myself. I mean, that was kind of my view. So he recommended some resources to me that really led me to looking mainly into the evidence for the New Testament and the evidence for the resurrection. And I remember sitting at my house one night, and I was reading about the resurrection, and it just hit me like, oh my gosh, this really happened. Like, he really rose from the dead. And I gave myself to Christ that night. And that was probably, at that point, I was probably 25, because it was kind of the end of the year of me being 24, if that makes sense. And so, yeah, it was through a pastor who recommended some resources to me. A couple that come to mind was, of course, C.S. Lewis, Mere Christianity, which is kind of a standard, right? And then Lee Strobel's Case for Christ, which was very helpful in introducing me to other thinkers, because, as you know, the format of his books is he interviews other thinkers. And so, yeah, that's how I was introduced to it. And I'll say real quick, I'm sorry, I'll say real quick too, that I had no idea. I do remember, after getting saved, questioning, why is it that I'm 25 years old and nobody has ever told me, hey, there's actually evidence for this stuff. And I remember thinking, I don't want to be that person. Like, I want to be the person that says, you should look at the evidence for this, So anyway, Brian, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, good stuff, Chad. Yeah, for me, I grew up in a Christian home, and I went to a Christian school, and my experience as a Christian was more experiential, and I didn't do a lot of heavy lifting when it came to finding out if it's true. I just assumed it was true. Although, looking back, I was exposed to a lot of apologetic stuff in my Bible class at school with a tremendous teacher. It just kind of, like, I didn't see any need for it, because, hey, it's true, and this is all just confirmation. So I didn't really internalize it or think about it too deeply. Although I'm grateful for it, because I think it planted a lot of seeds in me. And so, fast forward, after high school, I went into the mission field, and then after doing that, I went and I was working at a church, and doing media and all kinds of sort of things like that. And it turned out that I had a sort of a poor church experience, in that sense, where things went downhill in the church, and there were issues that caused me to say, well, it's time for me to leave this place. And in leaving, I thought, well, my question was, I was saying to my wife, like, I can't trust, who can I trust? I know God exists, but why should I even trust the Bible? So this experience of doubting, and this bad church experience, for lack of a better term, caused me to be like, how do I know this is true, and why should I think it's authoritative, the Bible? Right around that time, Da Vinci Code was coming out. And so the week that we left that church, we went to a different church. And that was not only our church, but it was my job. So it means quitting your job, not having another job, and be like, I'm out of here. And so the following Sunday, we go to a different church, and there's a panel of Christian apologists talking about why you could trust the Bible. And it was like, wow, this is what I need to hear right now. And I'm standing up, I'm asking questions, and like, wow. And I'm thinking, this is what I need to, you know, this is what I need to be getting into. And so I started reading about, why you can trust the Bible. And it was like, wow, I felt like I was almost born again. It was refreshing my faith, bolstered my faith and confidence. I started evangelizing like on my own. Before it would be like, oh, well, the church is going out evangelizing, come with us. Now I'm like, hey, I'm going to the DMV. There's all these people waiting in line. I'm going to go street preach to them, because it was just on fire again. And so moving over here to the Shire, also known as Northern Ireland, um, I continued to do street evangelism, and we started realizing that, hey, people are asking questions about like, why does God even exist and stuff. So these were previously, the apologetics was to get my faith back, so to speak, in relying on the Bible and being trustworthy. But now the apologetics aspect came in to be needed because, hey, I'm trying to talk to people about Jesus, but they have doubts. They have questions I haven't explored the answers to. I think I know that God exists, but how do I show that? And so that's what got me just reading and then finding great resources like, wow, this is a whole new world of stuff I never knew about. And so that kind of led me down the road of finding like resources from scholars and stuff. And I remember going on a walk with a dog or something and listening to a podcast or a lecture by William Lane Craig, and he says that they need people in academia to influence the culture for Christ. And if you can get a degree in philosophy or theology or these sorts of things, that would be really beneficial, something to that effect. And I thought, yeah, I'm going to get a degree. So I ended up getting a master's in Christian apologetics. I didn't get something in philosophy or theology or biology, something, but that's what I wanted. I thought, I'm going to do serious study in this area in order to really be equipped. And it has, since then, it has bolstered my faith, and it's helped me to not feel like flat-footed when I'm talking to other people. I have good reasons that I can not only know but show to others, and it's been really beneficial in that regard.
Okay, so I'm like noticing that both of you had an experience kind of church related, where you were introduced kind of through a church. So I was going to ask you what the effect of apologetics has had in your lives. And I think, Brian, you just spoke on that. Chad, did you have anything to add aside from like knowing that this is true?
Yeah, I would just add to it that for me, during times of, I struggle with anxiety, and sometimes with the anxiety comes doubts. A question can get stuck in your head or something like that. And I have told my wife on numerous occasions how comforting the evidence is, because when I'm having emotional doubts, I can go back to the arguments and the evidence and say, okay, right now, I'm having trouble feeling like this is true, right? But the evidence and the argument show me that it is. C.S. Lewis, I love what he said. He said that when he was an atheist, there were days where Christianity looked really probable, and now that he's a Christian, there are days that atheism looks probable. And of course, Lewis's point is that we can't ebb and flow with our feelings. We have to rest on that which is true. And for me, apologetics has just allowed me to be able to rest in what is true, regardless of struggles that are exterior to that. And then the other thing that's been great is that I'm able to give good reasons, not only to people, but most importantly to my kids. 13 and 14, they have a lot of questions, and wow, what a blessing it is to not whether I know the answer, I know where I can go get it. And what a blessing it is to be able to say, hey, you know why you should be a Christian? You shouldn't be a Christian because I am. You shouldn't be a Christian because it works. You shouldn't be a Christian because it feels good. You should be a Christian because it's true. And here are the reasons it's true. And that's been a great blessing.
Mm. Did you have anything to add, Brian?
No, I love Chad's point about,
Yeah,
talking to the kids.
yeah.
That's something that I try to weave in as much as possible because I'm aware of the challenges that they're going to have growing up, um, and the crazy culture that we're facing all around us. So yeah, that's a great point.
Okay, so we've seen the benefits of, churches incorporating apologetics in your personal lives. And, it continues to all the people that you guys have reached as a result of that. So how would you answer this question? Is apologetics optional for a Christian?
I'm going to
No.
write my answer down on a card, and you're going to write your answer down on a card. We hold them up at the same time.
And hold them and see if they're the same. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the answer to that to me is no. But I want to make sure that I'm clear here. Am I saying that everybody's focus in the body of Christ needs to be apologetics? No, I actually think that would not be healthy. We need musicians, we need poets, we need many different types of people for the body of Christ, right? Not every part of the body does the same thing. But the Bible's very clear. If we're commanded to do something, all of us are commanded to do it, right? And we are commanded to be able to give a defense for the hope that is within us. We are commanded to destroy arguments that raise up themselves against Christ. And so we're commanded to do it. Not only that, if we're following Jesus and we're following those who followed him, right? The apostles, you see Jesus did apologetics. When John the Baptist, when one of John the Baptist's men came to him and said, John wants to know if, when John was in prison and he sent one of his followers, he said, John wants to know if you're the one that we're waiting on, or should we expect somebody else? Well, what did Jesus do? He gave evidence, right? He said, look at all the things I'm doing, tell him to look to that. The apostles, if you read through the New Testament, there are so many instances of them. When they're talking to the Jews, they appeal to scripture. When they're talking to non-believers, they appeal to creation, conscience, the historical resurrection. And then, of course, we have the early church fathers who were apologists, people like Justin Martyr. And so we have not only the Bible commanding it, but it's also been a pattern since the very inception of the Christian church that we're to carry on.
Yeah, good stuff. You stole all the good scriptures.
Sorry.
I was gonna say
Let
all
me
of
get
that,
my
but
concordance. I'll find some other ones. No, I'm just kidding.
I don't think it's optional. But like what Chad said, that not everybody has to be like big on apologetics. What comes to my mind is who, what, why, and how. Who do you believe in? You need to know who you believe in, and I think that's the personal aspect of our faith. You need to know what you believe. Like, what does that even entail? What does that require? You need to know why you believe it. So you have to have reasons for yourself. But then how do you know it's true? And how can you show it's true? Those are things that sort of branch out. So, if you want to be a fully orbed Christian, as me and Chad like to say, it's this idea of being well-rounded, having power, love, and a sound mind. There's, those different aspects where you love the Lord your God with with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your strength. So yeah, I think it's just part of the Christian life is being able to give a reason for the hope that you have. There are times when the Holy Spirit will give you words, but we don't just, oh, well, I guess I don't need to think. There's enough stuff in culture where if you seriously want to hold on to your faith, you better know what you believe and why you believe it. And if you're going to be persuasive as a Christian ambassador, then you have to have some persuasive reasons, not just that persuade you, but to show that Christianity is viable in the world today. So I think we've got all the sort of stuff, and the resources are there to learn how to do that. And And if it's any comfort to the people who might think that apologetics is just for intellectuals, no, it's for everybody. Um, and it can be stuff way on the top shelf, and then it can be on the lower shelves as well. So there's all manners of ways to talk about how argument for God's existence. You could use some big philosophical argument about there being a first mover and a initial cause, that sort of a thing. Or you could say, well, every painting needs a painter, every book needs an author, every design needs a designer, and those are concepts that children can grasp. And so why not start there and work on up? So no, it's not optional, but it's often neglected.
Yeah. And I would also add to that I think that people are really missing out if they don't make this part of their Christian walk, because as I pointed out earlier, it can be very encouraging. It can bolster your faith. It can give you more confidence. It can be a great comfort, especially when bad things happen or you're not feeling well or whatnot. And also, too, as a point of encouragement, to kind of piggyback off of what Brian said, a lot of times when we think about giving a defense, right, we feel like, oh my gosh, do I have to have 4 arguments memorized or something like that, right? I mean, a lot of times just knowing where the resources are and being able to offer them to people that have questions, that's giving a defense,
Hmm.
right? You're giving a defense. And so I think Brian and I would not want somebody to feel like that they have to be exhaustively versed in theology and philosophy and apologetics, but it should be part of the Christian walk. Otherwise, you don't. I think you'll miss out and not have as rich a walk with Christ as you might otherwise.
And if I could just throw one more thing in there, we were talking there about how it's not just for intellectual things, but and how it enriches your life.
Mm-hmm.
I remember after reading about the resurrection and reading Habermas and different things, a bunch of scholarly tomes, basically, and thinking, wow, this is really persuasive. This is true. It's kind of like what you were saying there, Chad. And I remember being at this meeting or sitting around a bunch of circle of chairs, and it was for opening up this like children's outreach center or something. It was a Christian little place for kids to hang out. Anyway, and this was all doing the paperwork. We're doing the paperwork. So we're like, okay, well, we're going to read the creed and Christian beliefs, and just if everybody can just go ahead and affirm it after we read it. And they're just being totally formal. And so someone's standing there and they're like, we believe this, we believe that, and we believe that Jesus rose on. As they're reading it, I have to hold myself back from just bawling like a baby. I just remembered silent tears just rolling down my eyes as they were reading the creed, like, here's what we believe. And because it was like, wow, it's true. It's not just like, well, I'm just going to leap off this tall building and see what happens. It was like, no, this is true. And so the intellectual aspect of Christianity affects your emotions, and it should affect everything. So yeah, it's not just like it's book learning. So
Yeah,
real helpful.
that's a great point, Brian. I had a similar experience when I was studying the Kalam, and the universe began to exist, and I realized that God spoke the universe into existence, and that the evidence showed that the universe was created ex nihilo, just like the Bible says. I mean, it was just a worshipful experience. It wasn't just an intellectual one.
Yeah.
I might as well add something when I started learning about how everything has to be in such a precision, right? The universe, or
All
else
the
like
fine
it would
tuning,
just, yeah. When I first started hearing about that, I remember like I had this thing with my ear, and I remember just being really frustrated, and I incorporated that into my prayer, into like believing that God could answer, like move things around in such a way in my body so that the thing that was bothering me wouldn't continue bothering me. And wouldn't you know that like that was one of like the answered prayers in my life. And it's amazing how apologetics like helped me in that area. So
Oh,
how
that's cool.
about
Cool.
if there's someone that is like knows nothing about apologetics, but they would like to start learning about apologetics and figure out how they can serve God using what they learn, like what would you say to them?
You want to start, Chad? You want me
Oh
to go?
no, you go ahead.
Okay. Well, if it were books, the likes of Lee Strobel's books, The Case for Christ, The Case for Faith, The Case for Creator, The Case for fill in the blank, all of those books are designed to, as Lee Strobel is a journalist, so he interviews the apologists and the scientists and the people in those areas of expertise giving reasons to believe. So that would be one thing. If someone's into books or audiobooks, they could look at those books, and they've really stood the test of time. A lot of these books have been around for some time now, but they're still popular, and they're written at such a level where they will keep your interest without going too far over your head, and they'll give you an overview of an argument for the creator, or what Lee Strobel found in his, interviewing people about the faith. So that would be one way to do it. You could go to somewhere like Apologetics 315 or Truth Bomb Apologetics, different blogs like that, where certain topics are featured, and you can search those topics and find a variety of resources along those lines. So there might be websites or blogs or podcasts that you can be directed to. As I say, now there's so many resources that wouldn't be too difficult to find them. Now it's just a matter of narrowing down. Well, which one should I be listening to then, or what should I, should I trust this one or that one? So if you have other people in your life who are into apologetics, check with them and say, hey, what books would you recommend? And I would say there's another book by Paul Little. I think it's Know Why You Believe, and then another one called Know What You Believe. And those are small but really concise, impactful books. Again, they're a little older, but you can't beat them for accomplishing exactly what they were meant to do, and just a great introduction to apologetics. And sure, if anybody wants advice on things to check out, they can email us at podcast@apologetics315, and we'll answer the questions on the podcast. And if they include a Ghostbusters quote, we guarantee 50% better quality answers.
That's right.
So,
this is big, Peter. This is very big. I would only add to that real quick that I would say that as far as resources go, I would also add probably J. Warner Wallace in there. J. Warner Wallace is a cold case homicide detective, and his books are fascinating. It's almost like you feel like you're reading like a crime novel and apologetics at the same time. He parallels a case that he actually solved with his investigation into different questions, whether it be God's existence, the reliability of the Gospels, things like that. And just they're so readable. And in our podcast with Jay Warner, I mean, one of the things he said was, one of the reasons he writes his books like that is because he realizes people don't read as much as they used to. So he includes a lot of pictures. He makes it very engaging with the parallel of the investigation versus the apologetics. The way he words things, he kind of tries to keep the cookies on the bottom shelf. So those are some resources I would definitely recommend to a beginner. And then also, I would say one of the things that might be helpful, because Brian mentioned, and I think it's a very valid point, that there's so many resources out there that honestly, when you start looking into apologetics, it can be overwhelming. Like you can feel like you're drowning in the fire hose, right? So one of the things you might want to do is pick a topic that you're most interested in, or maybe even you have doubts about, and start with that. So for example, it might be the reliability of the New Testament. I know for me, it was that idea that when Paul said, if Christ isn't risen from the dead, your faith is in vain. Well, that was pointed out to me that Paul's basically saying like, hey, if he rose from the dead, this is true. If he didn't, it's false. And so for me, that was kind of the linchpin to look into. But again, depending on where you're at, it might be a different a place, but pick a topic you're interested in and focus on that. And maybe that'll be a little less overwhelming.
And how would they be able to figure out how they can, maybe they feel called to share some of the information they're learning, how could they kind of figure out, well, am I going to start a podcast? Am I a writer?
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, then I'll pass it over to you. I think that Greg Kokel is mentioned on his podcast, which is another one I'd recommend, standtoreason.org.
Absolutely.
Stand to Reason podcast, str.org, Greg Kokel. One of the greatest resources of all time. And his book, Tactics, has to be mentioned as well.
Oh.
At any rate, well, if someone starts like getting into apologetics and they want to engage with others, and like you said, well, should I be a writer? Should I be this or that? This is kind of going back to what we were talking about with that book, A New Kind of Apologist. I think, number one, what are you good at? Like if you're not good at writing, don't do that. If you're good at making websites or something, then they're like, hey, maybe I can help someone with the content. This so-and-so is really good at writing stuff, but they don't know how to use a computer. They don't know how to make a website or something. So, or if you got a great voice, then you could do the audio version of it. The point is that you have to find what you're actually good at, because you want to put out a decent product. Not to say it's essential, but it's a good sign. The other thing, find out what you're passionate about. The thing that interests you most is the resurrection, and you don't want to deal with sciencey stuff or cosmology or stuff, then don't go there. Focus on the things that really excite you. Me, pretty much everything does, so I'm a generalist. But there's certain veins that I like to get into and focus on. But in that sense, as far as what you're focusing on, let your doubts, your questions, your interests, your passions in those certain areas guide you to those things. Let your skills be assigned as to what you can do, and then just, I would say, pray and ask God, where can I be used in this way, and can you use me in this way? Would you use me in this way? And open the door, and then just start testing the knobs, to see if they're locked. And when something opens up, see where that might lead. And then back to Greg Kokel, he would say, bloom where you're planted. Wherever you're at, there's something you can do. There's someone you can reach. Maybe it's a friend or an acquaintance or something like that, and you can have conversations. There's a sphere of influence that you have. So I think that when you start reaching the people within your sphere, and being faithful with that, then the sphere can expand, but it will never expand unless you're faithful with the smaller part. So that would be my suggestion, is to use those sort of guidelines as a starting point, and go from there.
Yeah, I love that. My only thing I would add, I mean, you nailed that.
I was leaving it for you. No,
it was great, man. Seriously, I knew, that's why I told you to go, because I was like, yeah, this is Brian's question. He'll nail this. But the only thing I would add to that is just, sometimes when you start an apologetics ministry, just, and again, this seems like, well, of course, Chad, who wouldn't do that? But Brian and I have talked about this before. When you start, Brian talked about how you're reaching that sphere of influence that you have when you begin. You know what? You might get into apologetics, and the one of the people that you witness to and comes to Christ, I mean, they might end up being the next Billy Graham, right? And so be careful not to get caught up in this idea that I need to have this huge platform, that I need to have this, how can I monetize this? How can I brand this, right?
Yeah.
I encourage you not to get caught up in that, and just think, Lord, how can I be faithful with what you've given me today? I think Brian's advice there, take that to heart, because that's where you can go to kind of figure out what it is he wants you to do, but just focus on being faithful to him and not trying to build your brand or whatnot.
Yeah, that's a really good thing that Brian let you, finish this conversation with. That was very generous of you, Brian. Anything else you guys would like to share, and where can people learn more about what you guys do?
Chad's blog can be found at truthbomb.blogspot.com. On there, he does a weekly thing where he gives apologetics and Christian worldview in the news. So a lot of different things happening in culture today or news stories that have sort of relevance to apologetics. He features those. Also good quotes, book reviews, links to debates and videos. So it's a nice little, not a floodgate in your face with a zillion things, but steady feed of quality stuff and a lot of great timeless book reviews and resources and things like that. So, you know, you could search by topic and you can go there and find all those sorts of things. He's also on Twitter at Truth Bomb Apologetics, and he's active there. I just leave that to him. He's guns akimbo on Twitter. So, yeah, I'd point you guys over there.
Okay. Any last words, Chad?
No, just thanks a lot for having us on, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this conversation. I feel like we have so much in common. Like we are passionate about apologetics and reaching other people with that for the Lord. And so I'll leave
Amen.
all of the links in the description of this video if you guys want to go check that out. I encourage you to do so. Thank you, Brian, so much, Chad, for giving me this time. And I really love
Absolutely.
this conversation so much.
Hey, one more thing.
you.
I just want to thank you for the interview, but also to encourage you with Girl Talk Apologetics and what you're doing with that ministry. I see that as just wonderful and valuable.
Yes.
And keep doing it. It's definitely a good work, and all the stuff that you're posting on your YouTube channel as well. Those things are valuable, and I'm sure that you're reaching an audience that you know, me and Chad are not going to reach certain demographics, but I'm so glad
Right.
you're in that space and doing apologetics, and just really appreciate the privilege of being on your show here.
Yes, absolutely. What he said.
Yeah, thank you for the encouragement. It's always appreciated. So I hope you guys have a great day.
Thanks, you too.
Thanks.